Hello everyone and welcome to the webinar. Today's topic, ClearPath Forward ePortal 8.0 Release Announcement Webinar. Let's get started. Our first presenter for you today is Anil Mantu. And with that, Anil, the audience is yours.
Good morning everyone. I'm Anil Mantu, Global Product Manager for ClearPath Forward ePortal. We have a large attendance today for this presentation. I welcome everyone to this webinar for ClearPath Forward ePortal 8.0 announcement. We have a set of new innovative features that we will showcase today. I'm sure these features will really add value to you all. Without much delay, let's get started. I will briefly start by talking about ClearPath Forward ePortal product and how it adds value in your environment. Ralph will present all the new features as well as ePortal Software Edition, which we are releasing also with 8.0. Then Navneet will take over and talk about ePortal services. So let's get started. As we can see, the needs of all the stakeholders are evolving constantly. The end user behavior has drastically changed over the last 5 years or so. They expect the use cases and availability of services on all the devices at all the times. The end user has evolved and organizations need to be ready for this kind of requirements. Secondly, over the last few years, the nature of competition has changed a lot. Business models are constantly being eroded and new models evolve, making incumbents redundant. The barriers to entry are dissolving and technology is at the forefront for that. So there is a constant need to stay relevant with the changing times. There is also a growing need to optimize the infrastructure for better optimization of costs, which in turn leads to margin improvements, improve agility, as well as flexibility for our organizations. So the way to differentiate and create stickiness with the current user base is by providing a unique user experience which is aligned with the needs of the users. So the question is, how do we take advantage of these challenging times and also provide a solution keeping the business goals in mind? The answer is ClearPath Forward ePortal solution. This is a single implementation which helps you solve the issue of modernization, helps service multiple devices, and integrates applications, as we will see in the coming slides. And all of this is done while making no changes in the application. I would like to start off by briefly reviewing ePortal's overall role and the place it has in your ClearPath environment. As we know, ePortal is an end-to-end solution that lets you easily extend, and for your ClearPath applications, it allows to take advantage of new business opportunities by providing users with real-time access from the web, mobile, and through B2B web services. ePortal helps you streamline business operations, reduce development and ongoing management and support costs. It helps improve end-user satisfaction and adds agility by enabling you to rapidly incorporate emerging mobile and web presentation technologies. So how does ePortal accomplish all this? Well, as we can see in this particular diagram, ePortal accomplishes this by enabling you to transform monolithic single and two-tiered applications into a modern multi-tiered and agile architecture which is capable of delivering the latest web, mobile and web services based interfaces. You can do this by leveraging your existing application assets in place and without change, thereby eliminating risk or interruption to your ongoing operations. At every point, ePortal provides a high degree of automation, which assists through all the steps required, from capturing your existing presentation assets to web tier application generation through deployment and management to a highly scalable private platform as a service infrastructure. And all of this is done from a single integrated solution. ePortal was historically till now available in two variants, as we can see on the left side of this particular slide. We had ePortal Business and ePortal enterprise configurations. Business is an entry-level system which was specifically meant for clients who wanted to try the features in a small IT setup and having limited resources. This the ePortal business was actually non-scalable and non-redundant. It is a simple product for you to go with modernization. For some other clients, we have ePortal Enterprise, which on the other hand provides customers with more advanced features like high availability and additional scalability. Also, it helps customers with higher level of SLAs and higher level of performance. Now, as we see on the right side, with this particular release, we are introducing ePortal Software Edition, which will have performance comparable to the current ePortal business solution, but gives the customers flexibility to use the infrastructure of their choice. In the upcoming slides in this webinar, we'll talk about virtualized environments that are supported and all of the additional details regarding SE. We talked about the functionality of ePortal. Now let's quickly walk through some of the key benefits. Accelerated time to market. Well, since ePortal, there is no need for evaluation and any sourcing integration technologies, so a lot of time is saved, which helps to get the solution out faster. We do not need to take down applications for any patches or any updates. And with a single project, we are able to generate a solution for mobile, web and web services, thereby giving us a high reuse. Extensive automation is another thing where ePortal helps a lot. So there is no need for developers to actually write any code with ePortal. It allows web-based monitoring as well as staging. And finally, there is an automated dynamic provisioning and load balancing, thereby which removes any of the manual intervention needed. The third important benefit of ePortal is that we do not need to learn any new skills. With a simple point-and-click approach, we are able to generate a solution which is very ready to use and quite easy to implement. You do not need to invest in training or hiring talent with any specialized skill set. Also, we have designed the product in such a way that it has OS 2200 and MCP architecture in mind. So overall product design is very easy to understand. Last and most importantly, the return on investment. As we just discussed, there is no need to hire or train any new talent with any specialized skill set for developing applications with ePortal. So a lot of cost is saved for the organizations here. The solution is flexible enough for changes and also responses to new use cases and business opportunities, making it a very nimble solution for the companies. Also, a single project will help generate a solution on mobile, web or web services, leading to savings and a lot of reuse opportunities. With this, I invite Ralph to talk about the new features that are part of ePortal 8.0. So over to you, Ralph.
Okay, thanks, Anil. Okay, my name's Ralph DiOrio. I'm an architect for ClearPath Forward ePortal. And what I'm going to do is talk to you about some of the new features that we have for ePortal, our latest upcoming release, ePortal 8.0. I'm also going to add a couple things from our 7.1 release. So our 7.1 release came out earlier this year, around the December timeframe. And if you're upgrading from an earlier version of ePortal to 8.0, you might see some of these new things. I'm going to really focus on the software aspect of that. We had a new hardware platform introduction with a new for business, for ePortal Business, with a new platform console and lots of features. But I'm really just going to talk to some of the more relevant software things that you might find in this release if you haven't been following the updates. First of all, I'll start off talking about what we have for developers. We've got some new things. We now have support for 2017, Microsoft's latest version of Visual Studio, as well as being able to run side by side. That's something we haven't had in the past, and that's a nice benefit when you're transitioning from earlier versions of Visual Studio. We've got a couple new features for administrators. Some of them, most of them are centered around managing the systems and automation. So we've got some new ways that you can do performance monitoring, gather historical statistics, as well as we have been over our last few releases, bringing you improved DevOps capabilities and automation support. And then, as Anil mentioned earlier, we have a completely new offering for ePortal called ClearPath ePortal Software Edition, or SC for short. And that is really centered around taking advantage and addressing the move that organizations are engaged in now with moving to virtual infrastructure. So the software-defined data center. And we'll talk about some of the advantages there. And we're kind of looking at that as a virtual appliance approach to ePortal, and I'll explain a little bit more about that later, what I mean by virtual appliance. So let's start off with Visual Studio 2017 support. Actually, for this release, it's required. So if you want to upgrade to upgrade your developer capabilities to ePortal 8.0, you'll need to move to Visual Studio 2017 to take advantage of that. While that being said, you can now run your ePortal developers side by side. So you can have Visual Studio 2000, was it 15, the last one, or 16? On your, have your projects running there and develop new projects, or migrate those older projects to 2017. Now for migration, it's all automated as we have done in the past. So you would import your existing ePortal projects, and we do all the work of converting anything that needs to happen along the way there so that they appear in Visual Studio 2017. The other feature we're delivering here is the ability to target the latest version from Microsoft of the .NET framework. So while you can still target older versions, if you want to take advantage of a specific feature, capability that's being delivered only in the .NET Framework 4.7, you can do that now simply by configuring your project to target that version. Okay. A couple other ease of use kinds of things we have in this release is we've improved the support for importing, capturing your COBOL applications. Before it was a somewhat laborious wizard that you had to go through, and if you had a lot of records or a large copybook, it wasn't the most pleasant experience. What we've done now is we've enabled you to take your program like you're seeing here. So this is just COBOL source that we're looking at. And when we import it, you import it the same way. You navigate to the copybook and you do an import. You'll get a nice summary of your program, and you can manage it all from this one grid. So for example, if we go across the top here, you see the COBOL data descriptions for all the records you've imported. In many cases, we can detect whether or not that particular record is used for input, output, or both. Whether or not you've imported it before, or whether you want to re-import it. And in many cases, ePortal will normalize the name, and it will give you that normalized name there and show you what it will look like from this point going forward as you deal with it in your user interfaces and services and so forth. So much, much easier way to manage COBOL projects. Now, one thing I think was kind of important and a very nice feature, but it was released in 7.1, so if you upgrade to 8.0, you'll see this also, is you'll see it's a new orchestration activity. So activities are the concept of how you build orchestrations. You drag and drop activities onto a visual designer. We have a new activity called a message filter. And what this enables you to do is implement cross-cutting concerns in your ePortal applications. So what does that mean, cross-cutting concerns? So ePortal applications are very message-oriented. Messages come in from the client and they're sent and received to back-end servers. And a cross-cutting concern is some operation or some function you want to execute across all messages of your application, not just in a particular activity or message handler, but through everything. So you can think of it as implementing things like logging, encryption and decryption of messages, maybe session control and so forth. There may be even manipulating the message, all messages somehow, adding a header or so forth. The way message filters are implemented, they sit between orchestration and your connector that goes through your backend applications. Again, there are new activities. This is the ePortal communications activities toolbox there, and you'll see there's a new message filter activity. What you simply do is drag and drop that onto your design surface. You can create message filters that handle messages sent to the server or received from the server. Okay, or you can use the same activity for both directions also. The activities, once you have them on your design surface, you implement them. You just simply double click on them, and they're written in C#. So you'll get an interface created for you, C# method, and you just add the logic that you want to implement when you receive that message, either input or output message. Okay, so very nice feature for implementing kind of a custom ways of dealing with messages that apply to all the messages sent or received to your backend servers. Okay. Now, a couple other things we have in orchestration in 8.0. You have more flexibility on how you connect to backend applications. Before, it was kind of a fixed property that you had to set for a project, and now you can do that programmatically. So a lot of things like where you want to do message-based routing, where you want to look at the message that you got in from the client and determine what backend application you want to send that to. That's one possible use case of using this. Another use case is if you want to allow the client themselves, you know, in an interactive session from a form, say, to enter maybe some attributes of which system they want to connect to and what application windows and so forth they want to connect to. So now all that's can be passed from the client or done programmatically in ePortal in your orchestrations. It's very handy for the type of applications that our clients are moving to, things like distributed applications that talk to multiple systems. Another ease of use kind of thing that we've made available in this is for AB Suite and EAE applications. What we do now is we give you a lot of flexibility when you import your iSpecs. So you can say, for example, I want to preserve the look and feel of my EAE or AB Suite application. I want to use ePortal, but I want to preserve that look and feel. I want to maybe turn it into something that uses more web-based technology, so HTML and so forth. You can preserve that, or you can say, I just want really the metadata, the forms, and maybe some of the text, but I really want to radically alter the user interface. We provide you the ability to do that, to turn off some of those things and to discard some of the formatting. For this release, we allow you to optionally preserve the order of tab. So in AB Suite and EAE, you can specify tab index and how you tab through the fields. and this simply allows you to preserve all that and have that also transferred with when you import the records. And again, this works across EAE presentation types that we provide in ePortal, so things like web forms, the ePortal mobile forms, or say something like MVC view files. So that's some of the miscellaneous stuff we have. Okay. So that concludes what we have in this release for developers. So a few things, not a major functionality that we're introducing there. For the manager, for administering the system, as you know, over the last couple releases, we're very much focused on services, making all the operations available via services, and that's to facilitate automation of the platform. Things like DevOps and other automation packages that enterprises are using can be integrated with ePortal. For this release, what we've done in the past, we've always had SOAP-based interfaces, so that's a different kind of service protocol. In this release, we're introducing a REST-based API. I'll talk about that a little bit. We also have ways to customize performance information about your applications in the system. Talk about that a little bit. We've never had this before where we were able to capture historical performance data and analyze it. So we're introducing that in this release, and I'll talk a little bit about that. We also have some improved features around managing certificates, mostly around supporting for disaster scenarios where you might lose your TLS certificates and or accidentally delete them. And then overall improve reliability, especially around the areas of long-running operations like restoring from backup, updating software, and so forth. Okay. Okay. One carryover from 7.1 I just wanted to mention real quickly. It's a useful feature, especially in the OS 2200 realm. You don't see this very much in the MCP, but it's more common for OS 2200 applications. And that's where your backend applications, you have redundant backend applications. So in the past, an ePortal application could communicate with one host application. Now we've introduced the ability to load balance across multiple copies or a cluster of backend server applications. Those applications can be on the same system, so the same server, ClearPath server, or they can be distributed among different ClearPath servers. There's two modes of operation with this. One is a round-robin approach. And I should mention that this applies to connection establishment. So it's not each transaction, it's when a connection is established that it will choose one of these backend servers. So during a connection establishment, it can go round robin and distribute the connection establishment requests across those backend servers. Or you can use kind of an active standby type configuration where it always picks one host or host and application, and then if that becomes available, it goes to an alternate. And you can have any number of alternates or any number of backend applications that you round robin between. Okay? So what's happening here is we're accommodating the backend server clusters. Okay. The other thing I mentioned earlier, we've always had a SOAP-based web service capability, and SOAP is really for enterprise-type services, and it's very feature-rich, very robust, but also kind of a heavyweight protocol, and doesn't really interoperate as universally as what we've implemented called the REST interface. So this is our first introduction of REST web services for administration. And you'll find that if you're not familiar with REST, that it's a much simpler type of protocol, lightweight, and it's really optimized for the web. So it works, while it works with, it's become the de facto standard really for DevOps tooling. It integrates very easily with PowerShell, but it also works very well with browsers too, so, and JavaScript and across the board. So it's more universally supported, and it's lightweight and performs a little bit better. If you're familiar with REST, we support the different types of formats you want to use. So JSON is really popular, especially when dealing with JavaScript frameworks and so forth, but you also have the ability to choose XML. The types of things you can manage, if you look at the diagram here, you see all the ePortal manager operations are common base of operations, but there's different ways to invoke them and interact with them. We've always had the web UI, so that's the browser-based way of managing ePortal. We've had the WCF SOAP service, so that's Windows Communication Foundation Services, and then new is in the green there, the web API that you now have available. Okay. So let's take a quick look at that. It's very easy and friendly implementation, in my opinion, that we've done here. You'll notice this is the manager partition page, and under other there, you'll see the highlighted yellow. Right below that was our SOAP-based services. Above that is a new command to access the web API, and that's again the RESTful service. What that will bring up is the documentation page for this, and it's all integrated. The documentation is all integrated, so you can look through, peruse the documentation, search for what you want to find, look at the API, and not only that, but you can test the API right online. So you'll see here up on the right-hand side, you see the API link. You can click on that, and you'll get a list of the operations we provide, a description of that, of the operations. If you click on any of those, you'll go into the details for that particular web API, web service API, and it'll give you a sample of the kinds of responses you'll see. In this case, it's a JSON response, and you'll see the format of that. And you'll notice on the bottom right here, there's a button. If you click on that, you'll be able to actually test this API live. So you're presented with a dialog box where you enter the HTTP method, the URL path there, and any kind of data you want to add to the request. You hit the send button there, and you'll get the HTTP status back, in this case 200 OK. You'll see the HTTP header, the header portion of the HTTP message, and then you'll see the body of the web request. So what we requested here was a list of web partitions on the platform, and you'll see in the body it returned a JSON string that has the 2 web partitions that exist in this particular ePortal platform. So you can experiment and at your leisure and go through all the APIs and see the inputs and the responses, and following that you can use that in your custom automation. Another area that we focus a lot on in recent releases is continuous delivery of applications. It's becoming a trend in the industry now, and as well as just general automation. This again was available earlier in the year, but we haven't had a webinar in a while, so we decided to include some of this just for awareness. This one thing that we're delivering this release is a command line interface. We haven't had that before, or CLI. And if you're familiar with that, it's generally just programs that you run to do different operations. And more importantly, you can include those in, say, batch scripts or some sort of automation scripts. But we've also, the underpinning of that CLI is a web services interface that CLI interacts with. So you can also access this functionality through web services. And what I mean by continuous delivery, well, if you look at the workflow below here, you'll see with this release of the ePortal, you can automate the entire workflow. So everything from, as your developers check in their source, you can create scripts or use our CLI that, with a single click or a single invocation can retrieve the source from source control, restore any packages, the dependent packages that are needed for that particular application, build the solution. Then you can apply transforms for the particular type of deployment you're targeting, so the different options, network configuration, so forth for your application. From there you can stage it, and then from staging you can deploy it. So you can do the whole workflow, the whole deployment pipeline in an automated fashion. Okay. A couple additional features we have. ePortal has always had performance monitoring, and you can look at the overall performance of the system or particular applications. But the problem with the implementations we've had in the past is we picked which performance counters we believe were the most useful and that you'd want to see. There was very little flexibility around that. And as you know, in the OS, there are literally hundreds, if not over 1,000 different kinds of performance counters that you can monitor. So what we've done is we've enabled some flexibility there, and I'll show you what we've done there to make that more easy to decide and customize it to your for your needs. The other thing that we've done is we've never had the ability to capture historical performance data, and we have a new feature that enables you to do that. Now, if we look at the performance counters, the way we've implemented this is you can optionally include an XML file with your application. Here's an example of one. And you'll see in here we have some attributes, the performance counter, the name of the performance counter that you want to capture, some other information about it, how you want to aggregate the data when you're talking about across clusters and so forth. And what you do is you deploy this with your application. It just becomes part of your root directory for your application. And when you deploy it, ePortal will pick up this specification and then include whatever performance counters you deem necessary in this in the views, the various views that ePortal provides. So one example here is this one. We're adding calls for web services, how many calls were made to a web service. And on here you'll see the standard ePortal ones on the top in the management interface, and then if you go to the bottom one, you'll see the calls that have been added. So again, pick out which ones you need, add them to your applications, and you can have custom performance metrics. Now for historical performance statistics, this is an ongoing process. You turn this on. The timing can range from 1 second to 1 hour, the interval of when we capture performance data. And that performance data there's a new command to retrieve that performance data, and it's returned in Windows binary format, a format that can be uploaded into performance monitoring tools, one of them the Microsoft Performance Monitor. So once you've done that and you've turned this on, and you can turn it on leave it on all the time, but I would recommend a long interval because it will affect your performance. Or you can turn it on if you're trying to diagnose a particular issue. And what you'll get, and then you retrieve that information and you can load it into a tool of your choice. And here's an example of one that we've downloaded into Microsoft's Performance Monitor. So it gives you a nice historical overview of what's happening on your system without having to sit at a console and view this, or even automate it via services pulling down that data. We can do that for you. And the last thing, this is also from 7.1, just so when you're using ePortal, and if you've installed 8.0, you might see something like this and wonder what this is about. The highlighted area there is new. In the past, for alerts are things that require your attention in ePortal. We've always enabled the forwarding of alerts to things like email, a list of email recipients, and you could categorize, which ones you wanted forwarded, all of them, only errors or warnings and so forth. And what we've done now is enable you to both send them to the host log. So you have a primary backend server, which is a ClearPath system. Both systems, OS 2200 and MCP, have system logs. And we have clients that like to see everything kind of consolidated in their system log. They use that quite often. And now you have the option to have the same kinds of filtering and have that included in your system log if you like. In addition to that, you can also have them appear on the console. So if you want severe, just errors, which are really critical issues, if you want those to appear on your ClearPath console, you can also have them sent there. Okay, so that concludes ePortal 8.0, and I'll talk about the availability, how you can get that, and later down I think I have a slide that speaks to that. But what I'd like to turn our attention to now is a new platform. It's a virtualized version of ePortal. I mentioned before. So we know the next generation data centers, they're software defined. And what that means is that to change either the networking configurations, storage, who gets storage, how much, where it's available, what type of storage, the compute, the number of machines you have, how much compute resources has been assigned to them, and so forth. It's all dynamically controlled. So there's no physical moving of hardware and or anything like that. You have your infrastructure, and then you can decide dynamically and in real time and through automation, how you want to deliver that infrastructure and how you want to apply it to workloads. And it can be dynamically provisioned, so it doesn't have to stay the same. It can change for changing conditions or changing, times of times when things get busy or slow and so forth. And really, the whole purpose around this is for agility, which everybody wants increased agility, especially with the rate of change that is happening in many industries. And the flexibility and reliability. Everybody wants flexibility and reliability. And those things also, they translate to lower cost ultimately and better service. So we recognize the benefits of that new data center delivery. We have a new ePortal solution. Oops, I think it jumped backward or forward. We have a new ePortal solution to address that. And we believe that this is our first step in addressing this environment, and it's designed for on-premise virtualized infrastructure, and it's designed to simplify deployment and operation of ePortal applications in that virtualized infrastructure. The approach we've taken for this is we've created what we call a virtual appliance approach. And in the past, if you're familiar with ePortal, and as Anil mentioned, ePortal was always an appliance, the runtime portion of it was an appliance-based delivery. And by appliance, I mean you got a box that had, that was the hardware. It had any hypervisors, OS software, the licensing for that software, any virtual machines that were required to be configured, network configuration. Everything was prepackaged in this one hardware delivery, this hardware appliance. And really you just turned it on and you were off and running with that type of appliance. With virtual appliances, it's a little bit different. While we provide a lot of value add, what we expect is that you provide with your infrastructure the hardware, the hypervisors, the OS software, and the licensing, and configure the virtual machines and network configuration. And what Unisys provides is an automated creation of virtual appliances for that virtualized infrastructure. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, what that means. Our first release we're calling ePortal SE for Software Edition, and it is, if you're familiar with our business system today, it's really functionally equivalent to the business system. It has a few things that are different, but essentially, if you're familiar with the business system, you'll be familiar with the features for ePortal SE. So where does it fit in our overall product profile? So we have ePortal Business Appliance on the bottom there. ePortal Enterprise, which is our enterprise solution, and then ePortal SE on the top there. The transaction rate for a single web partition is 40 transactions per second for our ePortal Business Appliance today, and it's also 40 transactions per second for a single web partition with 2 cores assigned to it. We'll talk a little bit about that later for ePortal SE. And for enterprise system, it's higher than that. It's 120 transactions per second. Now again, this is for a single web partition. ePortal Business Appliance comes with 4 web partitions. That's not configurable in any way. You get 4, and that's what you get. ePortal Enterprise, of course, you can have up to 24 web partitions. So multiply those numbers by the number of web partitions you have. And ePortal SE, again, there's more flexibility here because you can assign more cores to a single web partition. But for a 2-core partition, we allow you to allocate up to 16 cores. So that's 8 web partitions at the 2-core partition allocation. But we limit ePortal SE to a total of 16 cores. Okay. Now these are just for reference. The performance of applications varies greatly. It depends on what the application is doing, how it's designed, and to some degree, the hardware is going to matter too. So on contemporary hardware, you might see numbers like this. But of course, we're running on provided infrastructure, and it really depends on, in some cases, to a degree, on what that hardware is. Okay, let's talk about some of the requirements you're going to need to run ePortal SE. We support 2 hypervisors, 2 of the major hypervisors. So we support VMware host environment. That's VMware ESXi. We support 2 releases of that. We support the 6.0 release and the 5.5 release. It may work on other releases, but again, we don't test or support earlier versions. We also support Microsoft Hyper-V. Microsoft Hyper-V actually has a host environment, so kind of an OS that runs on the bare metal. We support 2 versions of Windows there, so we support 2012 R2 with the Hyper-V role, and we also support Windows 2016 with the Hyper-V role. Again, that's for the host OS. That's not, we're not talking about the VMs at this point. Now, the virtual machines that you need to configure, and that's where what we turn into ePortal virtual appliances. We support 2 versions of Windows there. We support 2012 R2 with the GUI installation option, and we support Windows Server 2016 with the GUI installation option or Server Core. And if you're familiar with Server Core is Windows with all the GUI stuff stripped out of it. And we actually recommend that because it's less resources, first of all, that you're gonna need. So you may see better performance, but it also reduces the attack surface. In my mind, that's a little even more important that you run with a reduced attack surface. Should mention that all virtual machines that you create for ePortal have to have the same operating system. So if you choose 2016, choose 2016 across all your VMs. Okay. Now, some of the virtual machine requirements that we have two categories. We have what we recommend and we have a minimum. The recommended is what you would use in, say, a production environment. And as always, for most of these things, that's a minimum recommended. So we recommend 2 cores for the manager and 2 cores for each PM. But of course, the PMs, you might want to add more cores to them, the web partitions. And straight across, the same is true for the memory and so forth. The virtual NICs are things that you configure in your hypervisor, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means later when we look at the network configuration. Now, what's the minimum mean? Well, the minimum means that you can install. We won't prevent you from installing. The installers check for these things, but you can install with a minimum configuration, but you probably wouldn't want to run your production environment that way. You might see performance that's less than desirable. But you might want to run, say, this on your laptop if you're doing a development environment, or you want to do demonstrations or just test out features. So we will allow you to install it with minimum requirements. And we'll give you a warning there, and anything below that, it will not install. So it will give you an error. And of course, going below 1 virtual core really doesn't make sense. But the other ones, if you go below those, you'll see that we won't install. We'll give you an error and tell you what you need to do. Okay, so let's talk about the network configuration, because there's a couple parts to this. You don't only need to provision virtual machines, you need to provision how they're configured in the network sense. Now remember, ePortal is a clustered environment, so you have clusters of servers running your applications that you run your applications on. And it's a typical web tier architecture. And by typical, I mean it has a front-end network, back-end network, and it typically resides in a DMZ, so a demilitarized zone from a security standpoint. So, and this is the same across the product line. So this is the same for the enterprise system and the business system. So the same is true for ePortal SE. We partition the traffic and isolate the traffic, not only for performance, but really for security, so that your front-end traffic never traverses your back-end networks. And the back-end networks are where your ClearPath systems reside. And your management, your management connection, you never see front-end traffic on your management connection or back-end traffic on your management connection. Now the front end in a typical web tier architecture, it connects your clients. So these are, either interactive clients or services. So this can go to your public intranet or internet. Your back-end connection from ePortal connects you to your back-end servers that host your applications, so your ClearPath applications. And you think of that as your application servers or databases and so forth that reside on the back-end network. And then the management LAN, this is a lot of heritage behind this in typical ClearPath environments. They have a LAN that only administrators can access, maybe physically isolated from the rest of the intranet, and we provide you the ability to connect to that LAN and participate in that secure environment. Now for ePortal SE, there's two basic approaches to executing this configuration. One is through the use of VLANs that I'll show in a minute, and the other is through hypervisor vSwitches, so virtual switches from a hypervisor. If we look at this network, this is using vSwitches, and you'll see the gray box there is your hypervisor. And we have three, you need to define in your hypervisor three vSwitches. Again, the back-end vSwitch, front-end vSwitch, management switch. You have your web partitions here in virtual machines. You have your manager partition in virtual machine, and then you define these vSwitches to connect the network and effectively create that web tier environment. I have NIC or VNIC here. Some of these components can actually be within the hypervisor also. So if you're accessing it from within that hypervisor or from maybe the host OS and Windows, you actually wouldn't need a physical NIC to get outside the box. Okay. The other configuration you can use is with VLANs, and VLANs you only need to define. Again, you have your web partition virtual machines, you have your manager virtual machine, and you only need a single virtual switch in this environment. And the way you isolate and segment that traffic is through the VLANs. And that provides a kind of a logical way to affect what I showed you earlier, but has the same effect in segregating the traffic. So it's up to you which of these you find more convenient. Okay. Now an example of one, so this is one where we use vSwitches, and you'll see we have three physical NICs here, and then a ClearPath system or systems off-board here that we communicate over the back-end network. Another way to configure this would be to have the single virtual switch, and you'll notice in this case we have a single NIC, which is also has pros and cons, but if you're on a system with a single NIC, a lot of systems have two NICs now in their data centers that go to top of rack switches, so it's often not up to an admin how to configure the physical aspects of the network. So you have the flexibility to leverage those different kinds of hardware provisioning that's available. By using the flexible, by using VNICs or separate switches and so forth. One more example I want to give you here is, this is an example of setting up a development system. So in this case, you'll see there's no physical NICs. Everything is residing in one box, and you can kind of envision maybe doing this on a laptop. Not only do we have the ePortal components in here with our virtual switch, but we also have the ClearPath software series server running under the same hypervisor, or you could have an AB Suite backend server, a Windows server in there, all connected to the backend LAN and the front-end LAN. And then there's also a connection, a VNIC or VLAN for the host OS. And as a user of this system, you would log into the Windows host OS, and you could access the front end of this environment or the manager. You could share the manager all from that. So a completely self-contained ePortal system, maybe on a small system like a laptop, with the MCP running there in this case, and client access and so forth. So lots of flexibility. That's what you would expect in a in virtualized infrastructure. Okay. Now with this release, we're taking a different approach to licensing and support. So in the past, ePortal appliances, they were these fixed boxes that we, purpose-built hardware appliance that we would sell you. In the business, ePortal business, it came with a single price because it was, it was non-configurable, and you got 5 years of support with that system, and you had 4 web partitions with it. ePortal Enterprise was a little bit different. It was also delivered as on platforms, but you could have multiple platforms. You could have up to 6 platforms and up to 24 partitions. Each partition beyond the 2 that we delivered in the base platform required a license, so you had to buy additional licenses for those partitions. But again, it was the base price plus whatever you wanted to add on in the original purchase or thereafter, plus 5 years support. Okay. For ePortal SE, we're taking a different approach since we're not selling boxes anymore. What we're doing is a core-based licensing model, and these are virtual cores. And what you get is you get a base license, and I'll talk a little bit more in detail about this. You get a base license, and then you can add additional cores after that for the life of the system. As long as the system is licensed for. From the support aspect of it, we're supporting the software now. And the software covers 2 major ePortal SE software releases. So if you buy ePortal 8.0, we'll support 8.0 after 9.0 comes out, after 10.0 comes out, and then 6 months past that time. Okay. Now, if you want to move from 8.0 to 9.0, then you need to purchase the license for that's considered a new release. There's also something called a Server Connect license, and this is also new. So for each backend server that you want to use in your ePortal environment, so your ClearPath servers, you want to host applications there that ePortal users can access, it requires a license. And I'll talk a little bit about that, how you license that. So the runtime license, that's the base license that every ePortal SE installation needs initially to run license ePortal. The runtime license itself, when you buy that base license, you get the rights to use 4 cores for your web partitions. So you could have 1 web partition with 4 cores in it, or 2 web partitions with 2, following the recommended guidelines. You can buy more core licenses, of course, in that initial purchase in multiples of 4. So you can up to 16. So you can add, 8 more cores if you like to that initial purchase. And again, we recommend minimum of 2 cores per web partition. In addition to that, we sell core pack licenses. So after your initial purchase of ePortal SE, you can decide later that you want to add more web partitions for whatever reason. You want to create more clusters, maybe a test cluster or development clusters, or you just need to scale your performance environment, your production environment. Well, you can buy additional core pack licenses, and again, they're sold in increments of 4. A core pack license can have 4, 8, or 12 licenses to enable that that many cores. And of course, you can buy multiple core pack licenses. So you can buy core pack licenses, subsequent to earlier purchases. Okay. Now the Server Connect license, that's the license I said you need for your backend servers. And that authorizes a specific ClearPath Forward backend server for use in the ePortal SE environment. So you need a primary backend server, and that's where you stage your applications and stage software and interact with the ePortal system. That requires a license now. And any other system. So ePortal SE can communicate with multiple backend servers. And each of those servers requires a license. In addition to that, each of the servers requires you install host agent software. So that's the software that coordinates things like coordinates support for an ePortal environment between the host server and ePortal itself. So each backend server needs to have that host agent license software installed. In some cases, for some of the backend servers, it merely just checks the license and acknowledges the license. Now, I should mention also that this is a tiered licensing model, and what that means is not all licenses are the same. There's a small, medium, and large. So if you have a small system, there's a different license for that, a medium system or a large system. So kind of like bronze, silver, and gold type things you see with our software series. It's similar to that. Small will map to the different systems, and there's different prices associated with those. Okay, so the way you get this is very different from what you've experienced in the past with ClearPath software. ePortal, this release of ePortal utilizes something called the new Unisys Download Center, and that's the way you get the software. You download it, and what happens, the way this mechanism works is you order the product, and what you'll get is an email, and in that email, we call that a welcome letter. And that welcome letter has, first of all, the credentials to log on to the Unisys Download Center, and that's where you're going to obtain your software and keys. It has instructions for downloading the license and activation keys. Let's explain what the differences between those are. Instructions for downloading the software, of course. In our case, it's a zipped ISO file that you're going to be downloading. And then something called a customer order data file. And that gives you the specifics of what you've bought. So how many cores are you licensed to use and so forth. Now I should also mention that custom order data file has a control number, a manufacturing control number, and that uniquely identifies the system. So once you order this, it's for a particular system, particular environment, and you just can't move around and then of course make copies and create other instances. It's linked to the Windows and the manager Windows runtime that you created the requested the activation key for, and I'll show you that. So again, the software comes down as an ISO. If you open the ISO, you see a README in there, and really it's just two installers. There's a manager installer and a web partition installer. Talk about that. So what do these installers do? Well, the installers are what create your virtual appliance. So once you have a VM that you want to turn into, say, a manager partition, or a VM that you want to turn into a web partition, you copy that installer to that particular VM, and you run it, and it goes through the process of building a virtual appliance for you. So what does that mean? Well, it's going to condition the operating system. It applies a desired state configuration to that operating system. So that means it's going to remove features of Windows and software that's not required for ePortal to reduce the attack surface and improve performance. It's going to install some things that ePortal needs and enable some features that ePortal needs. So that's the first part of the process. The second part of the process is to actually install the agents, ePortal agents, the thing that turns it into a manager partition or a web partition. And then it's going to configure the system and set any additional security options and for optimal performance and security. So at this point, it's going to remove user accounts and add other user accounts. And once this is complete, you have a virtual appliance, and it's a headless appliance, I should say, in the case of web partitions. So that's no different. We now control that VM. We provide all the management and security for it, and you don't directly go and install software or go into Windows again to do anything specific. That turns it into an ePortal virtual appliance. I should mention that there's the ability to streamline this a little bit. You're able to take a template along the way here and recreate PM so you're not running, if you have a 24 partition system, you don't have to go through all these steps again for each partition. There's some shortcuts that you can run there. You can see some of the details around that. Now, I'll just give you a quick example. Here's the wizard. So once this is copied to the VM, you just step through the wizard. It's very easy. You decide whether you want to just install the prerequisites on this VM or install everything, including the ePortal software. And in this case, we're going to make a manager, an ePortal manager. It installs, checks the prerequisites, does all the installation. You have to do a little bit configuration for your virtual LANs, your VNICs, I should say, your VNICs, as to which one you want to be the front-end network, back-end network, or management LAN. In this case, a manager has a management LAN and a back-end LAN. It's going to ask you for some credentials, maybe the IP address to connect to this manager partition, and give you the opportunity to confirm those settings, and then your software is installed, and that is now an ePortal manager virtual appliance. And it may reboot and so forth to come online. The same is true for web partitions. You step through the wizard. In this case, there's even less configuration you need to do. Just pick the front-end LAN and the back-end LAN, and you're set to go. And at that point, you have a web PM. And again, there's a templating mechanism that you can use in both VMware and Hyper-V that can shortcut some of the process of creating those prerequisites. Once you've created your manager, then all management of the ePortal environment is done through the manager. You no longer go over to the individual web partition VMs. All maintenance and everything else, very similar to the systems we have today. So it's going to look very much like the system we have today. And as you know, today, it's all done through the manager. The reasons for this is so that we can support the platform. So we need to know what's on it, and it's also our ability to provide the type of security that we want to provide and the reliability in a consistent manner across all of our clients. And so it really enables us to support that platform. Now, once you've installed it, you need to license it. So that custom data order file that you received in your welcome letter, we have a new capability in ePortal Manager to add that. You just browse to that file and import it, and you can do any core pack upgrade licenses also if you have those available. It's likely an initial purchase you wouldn't have those. So there's an activate license page that has a browse function, and you just browse to that COD file. And what it does is it generates an activation code for you. So it installs the license and generates an activation code. And at that point, a grace period starts, and you need to activate that license. So the way you activate that is you sign on to the Unisys Download Center again, you enter that activation code, and what it's going to return to you is an activation key that you're going to copy from the Unisys Download Center site and enter that into ePortal. And at that point, that license is now activated and your grace period is cleared. The grace period for this is 60 days, I should mention. So you have 60 days to activate your license once you've installed it, and you're good to go. Now here's just an example. So here you see that custom data order dialog box here. You'd browse to that, you'd add that in, apply that. What you'd get back is you'd see your licenses in here. So we have a runtime license as well as a ClearPath license installed. And you see the license state here. It's enabled and pending activation. And then you'll see the countdown to your right here. So 59 days before your system stops running the way you'd like it to. Okay. Now we never disable the manager, otherwise you'd never be able to activate a license once it expired. But or once the grace period expired, but the PMs will be negatively affected once the timer is up. Okay, so once you'll see the activation code here. You go to the site and get the activation key, and you'd paste it into this dialog box. And once you've done that, then you've activated the license, and there's nothing else you need to do. And your system is now up and running as normal. Okay. Now, again, I mentioned the activation key is generated by the Unisys Download Center, and it's linked to a particular machine and Windows, a particular virtual machine. So if you have to rebuild the platform, you're going to have to request a new activation license for that, or if you want to move it to different hardware and different VM, you'll have to do that. You have to contact Unisys support for that. The same is true for the Server Connect license. It's a similar process. It's downloaded from the Unisys Download Center, and you follow instructions to install that on the host, since that's a host key process and differs on MCP versus OS 2200. And that then enables that backend server to be used for ePortal. Okay, licenses must be activated. As we mentioned before, if it's not activated within the grace period, you'll find your core count goes down to 0. So your manager will still, because we don't count cores on the manager, your manager will still be fine, but all your web PMs will have 0 cores assigned to them. If they're already been allocated cores, they'll be removed from the clusters and so forth. You can read through this to see the things that will happen. I'm sure this will never happen to anyone. Now, when the grace period, when you're in your grace period, the system runs normally. So if you wanted to, kick the tires on a system or something like that, you could do that. But at the end of the grace period, at 60 days, you would no longer be able to use the system. And like everything in ePortal, we'll raise alerts when things happen. So we'll give you a warning and give you conditional alerts if there's any compliance issues. And as those issues are resolved, your conditional alerts will disappear. Okay. Core licenses, some details here about what happens, but essentially when you add so we don't prevent you from assigning cores to a web partition, from creating a web partition or assigning cores to it. There's nothing that's going to prevent you from doing that. However, when you try to actually use that web partition, and by use it, I mean add it to a cluster, if adding that web partition to the cluster would cause you to exceed your core allocation from a licensing perspective, that web partition will not be allowed to be added to the cluster. It'll be brought offline or not be added. So again, web partitions are not useful unless they're members of a cluster. So it's not to be confused that you can add the cores, but again, ultimately you won't be able to use that system, those additional cores. So I think I spoke about this. Basically, the Server Connect is the same. So it also has a 60-day grace period. If you want to communicate with an ePortal backend server, you're fine to do so. You can configure that and deploy applications. However, after 60 days, if you don't acknowledge the license, that will prevent you from communicating with that backend server. Okay, I think this is a last slide. Where do you get this? How is it available? So the ClearPath Forward ePortal 8.0, that's a software release. That's available for anybody that has a supported ePortal system today. So if you have, any ePortal system that Unisys supports, be it an inbuilt ePortal system, ePortal business system, ePortal enterprise system, as long as we support that system, you can download and install ePortal 8.0 on that system and get these features. Now it's available for MCP 17 and 18 or OS 2200 release 16 or 17. And the way you've done that is the way we've always done this in the past is you go to the support site and it's downloadable as an interim correction from the support site. If you want to, it's not required, but if you want to run Visual Studio 2000, if you want to install it in Visual Studio or use the Visual Studio capabilities, you need to be running Visual Studio 2017 with PowerShell 5.0 or later. If you want to target .NET Framework 4.7, then you need to download and install the .NET 4.7 package onto your into your ePortal environment, because ultimately that's where the app is going to run. And so you need to upgrade that .NET Framework environment. ClearPath ePortal Forward SE is imminent. Its release is imminent. So in the coming weeks, we'll be posting that release. So again, in summary, ePortal SE, a new virtual appliance platform. We talked about all its great capabilities and flexibility. And again, where we're heading as an organization, building solutions for enterprises, we're targeting virtualized infrastructure and software-defined data centers. And with the new automation services, that's also going to facilitate those virtual infrastructures, so the RESTful interface and all the automation we're providing in these releases. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Navneet. He's going to talk a little bit about the services that are being offered around ePortal and ePortal SE. So Navneet, I'm going to give you control.
Thanks, Ralph. Hello, everyone. I am Navneet Kumar, and I am the product manager for ClearPath Forward services. In this section of presentation, I am going to discuss about various ePortal services available at your disposal. So as you can see in this slide, we have a comprehensive services portfolio for ePortal. To help you with ePortal journey, we have introduction and assessment service, we have consulting service, installation service, digital modernization service, and client training service. I will elaborate each one of these in coming slides. Introduction and assessment service. This service makes you aware of the possibilities that ePortal offers in terms of digital modernization. There are two parts to this service: introduction and assessment. Under introduction, we will acquaint you with ePortal features, differentiators, value proposition, and benefits. We will also explain how to use ePortal to enable your ClearPath applications digitally. Under assessment phase, we will understand your requirements, assess your applications, and do holistic assessment of suitability of ePortal in your environment. As a deliverable of this service, we would also share assessment report with findings and key recommendations with you. Consulting or proof of concept service. The consulting or proof of concept service is here to assist you in understanding and making an appropriate decision for ePortal strategy by doing a proof of concept. The experiences and insights of proof of concept can then be extended to the rest of the applications. The first step under this service is identify and import, where we work with you and confirm screens to be modernized, import layout for selected transactions and screens. Then we install and configure ePortal components in your environment. Next step is modernization, where we generate presentations for the identified screens, followed by staging, deployment, and testing of the solution. Under demonstration step, we would do final walkthrough and demonstration of generated presentations. So why proof of concept service makes sense? Rapidly visible results would help you in decision making and in identifying areas needing special attention. You can leverage your existing ClearPath investments and see if ePortal would be a good fit for you or not. The objective of installation service is to install and configure either of ePortal Enterprise or Software Edition in your ClearPath MCP, OS 2200, AB Suite or EAE environment. As you can see in this slide, the key stages under this service are installation, configuration, and assists. Once installation is complete, configuration of ePortal environment is done according to agreed upon infrastructure design. We will also assist you with activities like network configuration and disaster recovery procedures. And the last service is digital modernization service. The objective of this service is to provide end-to-end implementation of web services as well as web and mobile enablement using ClearPath Forward ePortal to modernize your ClearPath MCP or OS 2200 applications. This service includes phases like assessment, proof of concept, implementation, user experience design, and training. Unisys digital expertise will be with you starting from strategy formation to execution to provide shortest application modernization lifecycle, ensuring minimal business disruption. With this, services section of presentation is over. To talk about summary and concluding remarks, I'll hand over to Anil. Over to you, Anil.
To summarize today's webinar, ClearPath Forward ePortal 8.0 will be available as mentioned in coming weeks. ePortal enriches your ClearPath applications even more now with newer features which are part of 8.0. And finally, we now have the flexibility to choose infrastructure of choice with SE. And lastly, ePortal services are always there to add value to the overall offering. So with that, I thank everyone for taking out time today and attending this webinar. I hope all of you found this webinar useful. And with that, over to you, Matt.
I would just like to go ahead and thank you all for attending. I want to thank my presenters for another fantastic presentation. And everyone, have a great day.